Now, a little warning before we begin here, there are major spoilers ahead for the third story arc or block of Andor Season 2, or episodes 7, 8, and 9. So if you haven't seen them yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really, really good time to click away. Alright, so the first thing I gotta say is just wow. That was exceptional. I am in awe at just how good that was. I am in awe at just how well crafted that all was. This wasn't just some of the best Star Wars I have ever seen, it was some of the best anything ever I have ever seen. The first episode of the arc felt like a ticking time bomb. You could just feel the tension. You could feel everything about to explode. And the second episode was then the bomb indeed going off, and you're just holding your breath the whole time. You're holding tight to see how the dust is going to eventually settle, waiting to see who is going to live, who is going to die, and the third episode is the aftermath. We get to see the immediate result of the Empire pushing way too hard, which is finally going to give the rebellion the leader that it needs, that of course being Mon Mothma. But anyway, before I get too into it here, as usual, this video will be more of a general overview, my thoughts on the whole arc, as well as going over some of the key moments or events or revelations, that sort of thing. And I say some of them because there is just a whole lot here to talk about in this arc. And over the next few days, I will be doing just that. I'll be doing a deep dive video going over each of the episodes in turn. But for now, let's start with the second episode of the arc, or 8th overall this season, because that was just perfection. It took you right into the middle of the massacre and made you feel everything. You felt like you were in the middle of the chaos and you just weren't sure what was going to happen, which way to turn, what to do, and it was genuinely frightening. And then the KX droids, the Enforcer droids, take the field, and they start literally chucking people around like ragdolls. And it was easily one of the most brutal things I have ever seen in Star Wars, which is saying something. We've seen some brutal stuff in Star Wars, actually. Because this wasn't one of those movies where people get, chucked 100 feet and then they just get right up and brush off the dust and keep going. No, they were being flung around and killed at random by what were essentially Terminators. And it's all kicked off by the Empire, who has been carefully planning all of this, planning for this very moment for years at this point, because they want the planet, and they want the rare resources in the planet, actually, for the Death Star. And they want to be able to place all the blame for what happens on the Gormans as well, even making themselves out to be the victims and or heroes in the process, which we hear they're doing. We see how the media is covering the event, how they're skewing everything to favor the Empire and making the Gormans out to be, or look kind of crazy, actually. And they even have them, the Gorman Resistance, seemingly fire the first shot at a group of very green or inexperienced Imperials who were sent out for crowd control. That was brutal as well, seeing the rookies basically sent out as fodder. And of course, again, being very green, they're going to panic and they're going to start shooting, and it sets the whole thing off. But of course, none of this could have happened, this plan of the Empire's could have never come to fruition without Cyril Karn, which is what he starts to realize in the first episode and part of the second one as well. That it was never about attracting outside agitators and trying to stop the rebellion that way. It was all about setting up the Gorman people to be massacred so that the Empire could freely take what they wanted and again be celebrated as heroes or victims in the process. It was all about causing them, the people of Gorman, to rebel, and Cyril was the one that led them right into the trap, unknowingly, of course. And maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I felt terrible for him. Absolutely terrible for Cyril because, as I've talked about before in other videos discussing this character, he always means well. He's always tried to do the right thing, and despite working for the Empire and playing a big part in the massacre, there is a good person in there who just so happens to fall in with the wrong crowd. And what started him down this path was looking for a murderer, trying to do the right thing. Let's not forget Cyril gets wrapped up in all of this because he was the only one willing to do the right thing. He was initially the only one who wanted to track down Cassian, who had killed, as far as he knew, 2 innocent security officers. And finally, at the height of all of this insanity, as Cyril is realizing all of this happened in large part because of him, as the guilt starts to mount, it's in that moment that he sees that which set him down this path in the first place. It's then that he sees Cassian, And for this oh so brief moment, I really wanted Cyril to run to him and say, hey, I want to join the rebellion. As improbable and as silly as that would have been, or as little sense that would have made. But of course, that wasn't going to happen, because from his point of view, Cassian is the reason he is here. He is the reason all of this has happened. He can now shift his blame and guilt to him. He can shift his rage to him as well. He can attack the thing that led him to this moment where he has been a big part of an atrocity. Cyril attacking Cassian like an animal out of rage is perfect. As is Cassian saying back to him, I don't even know who you are. Because he doesn't, even though, yes, technically they did briefly meet before on Ferrix. Cassian held him at gunpoint and Luthen told Cassian to kill the guy, to kill Cyril, but he didn't. And so the guy who was an obsession for Cyril, who again led him down a path to being manipulated by the Empire and by his girlfriend in particular, he really has no clue who the hell he is, which sort of causes him to hesitate and to begin to lower the gun, because I think Cyril realizes maybe that Cassian didn't do this to him on purpose. Maybe that's what he's figuring out right there. Cassian didn't intentionally do this to him. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what is going through Cyril's mind in that moment, but it is his last moment because he is about to be shot in the head by Caro Rylance, the man who thought the only way to win against the Empire was to stay peaceful. He ends up shooting Cyril, the guy who forced them into battle and led them to slaughter. And it's oh so perfect, yet so very sad, because you can't help but wonder what happens if Cyril's path had been just a bit different. What if he'd early on found his way to the rebellion, found his belonging with them? Because that's all he's really been looking for all this time, after never having a father, we can assume, and never getting love from his mother. He just wanted a place and a purpose in the galaxy, and the Empire offered it to him first. Instead of finding the rebellion, he found his way to Dedra, who herself seems to be having a lot of doubt about what she's done and is currently doing. In part, I think, because of Cyril. I think her betraying him actually hurts her, because he's likely the first thing she's ever really had to care about, or that has cared about her. And I am oh so very curious to see how her story is now going to wrap up next week. And speaking of stories wrapping up, we've almost certainly seen the last of Bix now. She's decided that the best thing she can do for the rebellion is to leave Cassian so that he will stay, because he's ready to be done with it all and to run away with her, but thanks in part to a Force healer, she's decided or has been convinced that he has a major or very important part to play yet. And he can't play that part if he leaves the rebellion because of her. And she is, of course, right. We know, spoiler alert, I guess if you haven't seen Rogue One, but we know Cassian is going to play a big part in stealing the plans to the Death Star. And what's so sad about this is that by leaving him, she's kind of condemning him to death and doesn't know it, but helping save the galaxy by making him stay at the same time. Though she thinks and even says that I'll find you in her final message to him, that we'll be able to do all the things we want to do together, like just have a normal life together. Whereas she's always said before that Cassian will find her, now she's saying it the other way around. But of course we know she never will. And quite honestly, I did not see this end coming. I thought Bix would be killed at some point during a mission or something like that, and Cassian would blame himself, that sort of predictable thing. And even though this end for them, for Cassian and Bix, kind of rips your heart out, I dare say this was also pretty damn perfect. Finally, we need to talk a little bit about Mon Mothma's escape from Coruscant, which somehow managed to still be tense and stressful despite the fact we knew most of the main players here had to get away. We knew, of course, that Mon Mothma was going to get away thanks to Rebels, the animated series, and that Erskine was going to also get away. He's also in Rebels, and that everything would more or less be okay between the two, considering he's with her in that episode of Rebels, that they're together and things seem okay. We also knew that Cassian, of course, had to get away because, well, we know where he is going to eventually end up. We were just talking about that. Though two questions I am left with are, how exactly is Bail Organa going to get away? Pretty sure the Emperor and the Empire is going to be pretty upset at him after yielding his time to Mon Mothma to make her epic speech. Then there's also Perrin, who, as talked about in other videos of mine, he's been sort of having maybe a mini redemption arc of sorts himself this season. He's been made to, I think, be more likable and certainly has been pushed more into the spotlight this season, which I think is, and still is, setting something up for him. I think in the final story arc, in the final 3 episodes, we're going to see what happens to him. I guess I'm just a bit sad that Mon never seems to mention him, or her daughter for that matter, before doing this big speech and then having to flee. She never just says, hey, I wonder what Perrin's up to and how he's going to feel about any of this. Though, like I said, I think it gets a resolution of some kind next week, and I'm very curious to see if it ends poorly for Perrin, or if maybe somehow all of those Imperial buddies that he has, the ones we heard about in Season 1, if they can maybe somehow save him and he can still go about leading a life on Coruscant. Either way, whatever becomes of Perrin, these were some phenomenal episodes, and I'm only scratching the surface here or covering some of the highlights again. I didn't even mention things like finally getting to see K2SO, or that we're seeing Yavin, the rebel base, from new sides or new angles, that we're seeing General Draven from Rogue One, or that maybe Willman didn't huff quite enough Rhydonium because he's apparently still working for Luthen and didn't join up exclusively with Saw Gerrera like I thought he was going to do, or was maybe kind of implied in the last episode there. And speaking of him, of Saw and Willman, actually, and of Perrin and all the others, I do feel like we have a lot to cover and wrap up next week, because it's also supposed to lead us directly into Rogue One, which means it has a lot to cover there. Not that I have any doubts, really, after these 3 episodes, not to mention the first 2 story arcs. I have very few doubts at all about the final few episodes next week. I'm sure this is going to have a great ending, and that firing up Rogue One right after and watching it is going to be a real treat now. But yeah, it does still feel like there is going to be a lot to cover, or like a lot of characters need to be sort of wrapped up, including a character like Luthen, who was barely in these 3 episodes and who has maybe sort of fallen by the wayside a bit as the rebellion continues to grow into an actual thing, if you will. And it seems like he has no interest in joining up with the rest of them on Yavin, which leads me to believe that, as was even sort of said in these episodes, that he is likely going to be caught by the Empire at some point. And it would be rather interesting if the one who does indeed end up catching him turns out to be the one who started to look for him in the first place, that being Dedra. And maybe she wants to, I don't know, leave the Empire and join the rebellion. Who knows, but something tells me that no, she's not going to do that. But you do never know. Alright, well, I think that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of these 3 episodes of Andor Season 2. Were they that damn good? Or maybe I've been huffing Rhydonium and they weren't so good after all. And again, I'll be going more into these 3 episodes in the coming days, covering all 3 of them individually. But either way, for now, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.